In the headlines on this Wednesday, the governor of the U.S. state of Missouri calls in more National Guard troops as tensions escalate in the city of Ferguson. Officer Darren Wilson says his conscience is clear. In what's seen as efforts to restructure the group, Samsung decides to sell 4 affiliates to another Korean conglomerate. And the Korean government will dispatch its first actual medical aid team to Ebola-struck Sierra Leone next month. These stories and more coming right up, an early edition at 6. It's 6 in the evening on Wednesday, November 26th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Na-hyun Kyung.
And I'm Daniel Choi. Thank you for joining us. Our starting point once again is the U.S., where the effects of a grand jury's decision in the Michael Brown case is being seen in various parts of the country.
That's right. The hardest hit, of course, is the city of Ferguson in Missouri. Governor Jay Nixon has even called for more National Guard troops to secure the safety of its residents there.
Starting us off is our Connie Lee.
Troops are standing guard everywhere in Ferguson, Missouri. Missouri Governor Jay Nixon has tripled the number of National Guard troops one day after the city was devastated.
Altogether, there will be more than 2,200 National Guardsmen in the region. Lives and property must be protected.
This is an attempt to avoid another shocking night like Monday, where protesters destroyed property, set cars after cars on fire, and clashed with authorities. The trouble saw more than 60 people arrested after a grand jury decided not to indict white police officer Darren Wilson for the deadly shooting of unarmed black teenager Michael Brown. President Barack Obama, speaking in Chicago, responded to Monday's violence and strongly condemned it.
Those who think that what happened in Ferguson is an excuse for violence, I do not have any sympathy for that. I have no sympathy at all for destroying your own communities.
The grand jury's decision is not only affecting the city of Ferguson. All across the U.S., demonstrators are crowding the streets once again on Tuesday. Seen here in New York City, residents are marching in protest as the effects of this fiercely disputed case continues to send shockwaves of racial tension throughout the nation. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And the officer in question, Darren Wilson, has broken his silence for the first time since his fatal shooting of Michael Brown. In an exclusive interview with America's ABC News, Wilson said he was sorry for the loss of life, but added he was simply doing his job and following his training. He said the experience has not haunted him and that his conscience is clear because he knows he did his job the right way. Now, those who think Officer Darren Wilson should have been indicted say the grand jury proceedings for this case were sloppy and biased from the beginning. Kim Young-gil explains some of the reasons in this next report.
Controversy abounds about how the grand jury reached its decision in the police shooting case. What we know is that 12 citizens were randomly picked for the Missouri grand jury, which was made up of 9 white and 3 black members. And according to state law, 9 out of the 12 jury members would had to have voted yes to indict Officer Darren Wilson. Brown's family has been complaining about the entire process since the beginning, from a special prosecutor not being selected for this case to the secrecy of the grand jury's proceedings. Some also say what went on behind closed doors should have remained sealed even after the decision was made. They have called prosecuting attorney Robert McCullough's decision to disclose the witness transcript as unusual. Prosecutor McCullough had also faced accusations of being biased as his father, a St. Louis County policeman, was shot dead by an African-American man in 1964. Many protesters say the prosecutor was not impartial and are calling for the appointment of a new special prosecutor to replace him. The Justice Department is conducting a separate probe into the Ferguson case to look into whether civil rights violations occurred or not, which could lead to federal charges.
The department's investigations will continue to be thorough, they will continue to be independent, and they remain ongoing to rebuild understanding and to foster cooperation between law enforcement and community members.
The department will also look into the Ferguson Police Department to examine possible patterns of discrimination. Michael Brown's family is pushing for a new legislation that will require all police officers to wear body video cameras. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now let us shift our focus to Korea. Foreign investment banks lower the country's growth forecast for next year. Bloomberg says the market median for Korea's growth next year stood at 3.6%, nearly half a percentage point lower than the Korean government's goal of 4%. The forecast ranged from 3% to 4%. Investment bankers cite slumping domestic demand coupled with unfavorable external factors as relatively lowered reasons. They expect Japan's monetary easing to weigh heavily on Korean exports next year. Back in April, when some 300 lives were lost during the Sewol ferry tragedy, Koreans naturally didn't feel like spending much. It's been over 7 months now, but consumer sentiment hasn't fully rebounded. Our Hwang Ji-hye reports on some of the reasons why.
The Korean government is trying to boost economic sentiment through a set of aggressive stimulus measures, but those efforts are not bearing fruit, not yet, at least. The Bank of Korea says the country's consumer sentiment index came in at 103 this month, down 2 points from a month earlier. The figure is even lower than the level recorded just after the Sewol ferry sinking in April, a tragedy that seriously dented private consumption. The index hovered at around the 108 level in the first 4 months of this year, but dropped to 105 in May following the disaster. Despite the drop, a reading above 100 indicates that optimists still outnumber pessimists. The monthly index reflects the overall economic outlook of consumers, their living conditions, and future spending plans. The central bank says the drop in this month's index largely stems from sluggish domestic demand and worsening global economic conditions like the weakening Japanese yen and the U.S. Federal Reserve cutting back its stimulus measures. Experts add that concerns over the slowing profitability of local exporters were also reflected in this month's Consumer Sentiment Index. Korea is heavily reliant on exports, which account for more than half of the country's total output. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
More disappointing numbers here in the nation. Recent data shows the nation's poverty gap keeps widening, meaning the poor are becoming poorer. Government policies are making little progress in narrowing the gap, especially when compared to its OECD counterparts. Our Kwon So-ah has this report.
The gap between the haves and have-nots in Korea is widening, while government efforts are not efficiently improving income distributions. Korea's poverty gap last year was 36.4%, up nearly 1 percentage point from 2012 and nearly 2 percentage points from the year before. Statistics Korea says households that earn less than half of the country's median household income accounted for 18.9% of all households last year. But the government's tax, welfare, and other policies managed to reduce the number of households falling below the poverty line by 2.5 percentage points. The effect of the government policies, however, was disappointing when compared with progresses made in other OECD nations. In 2011 alone, taxation and other government steps made an improvement of nearly 32 percentage points in Ireland, where less than 10% of households fell below poverty line. Government measures in France, Finland, and Germany all made improvements of more than 20 percentage points. The improvement in Korea for that year was 2.1 percentage points. Experts say Korea's income redistribution policies produced poorest effects among OECD nations.
It's crucial to collect higher taxes for higher income people and distribute the money to the poor. That must be strengthened in Korea.
The analyst added that the nation has to come up with better incentives and other supporting measures to help bolster spending powers of households in the low-income bracket. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Korea's biggest conglomerate, Samsung Group, is selling its stakes in 4 of its affiliates to another Korean conglomerate, Hanwha Group. It's seen as part of Samsung's efforts to restructure the group, with Chairman Lee Gun-hee still in the hospital. Lee Ji-yoon has the details.
2 of Korea's biggest conglomerates have agreed on a $1.7 billion deal. On Wednesday, Samsung Group said it will sell its controlling stakes in 4 of its affiliates to Hanwha Group. Considering Samsung hasn't sold off an entire business to a domestic rival for nearly 2 decades, the news is a big deal to many. Samsung is selling its defense businesses, Samsung Techwin and Samsung Thales, along with its chemical units, Samsung General Chemicals and Samsung Total Petrochemicals, to Hanwha. However, it is keeping Samsung Fine Chemicals and Samsung BP Chemicals. These are the ones that make materials for rechargeable batteries and liquid crystal display. With this deal, Samsung Group is looking to pull out from its defense and chemical businesses. Instead, it's going to focus more on its core businesses to bring in more profits. They include electronics, financial services, engineering, and construction. Experts say Samsung is taking aggressive steps toward restructuring, doing away with affiliates that don't improve the group's competitiveness. They add the company also seems to be getting ready to transfer the group's ownership to the next generation of the family, considering its head Lee Gun-hee remains in hospital after suffering a heart attack in May. With the purchase, Hanwha Group will jump up the ladder to become Korea's 9th largest conglomerate. Lee Ji-yoon, Arirang News.
Well, meanwhile, Korean companies looking to cut costs on labor and get tax benefits overseas are looking to Vietnam. Citing government data, Vietnamese media outlets are reporting that foreign direct investment comes to more than $17 billion so far this year, and that Korean firms account for 40% of that amount, or nearly $7 billion. That is the highest among the 60 foreign countries that invested in Vietnam, followed by Singapore and Japan. The reports attribute the influx of Korean investments to corporate tax benefits provided by the local and central governments, as well as cheaper labor compared to its main rival, China.
Korea is becoming more and more active in the involvement in global fight against the spread of Ebola in West Africa. The government will be sending 10 medical workers to Sierra Leone starting next month. The focus now is on finalizing the details on what to do if one of them should contract the deadly virus during their mission. Our Kim Ji-hyun reports.
Korea has finalized the details of a second team that will be sent to Ebola-hit Sierra Leone next month. Seoul's foreign ministry says it will deploy a team of 10 that includes 4 doctors and 6 nurses. They're scheduled to depart on December 13th and first head to a British Ebola treatment facility near London for training. Their medical work in Sierra Leone will start on December 29th, and it's expected they'll stay there for around 3 months.
We selected Sierra Leone due to their high number of Ebola patients. The virus is spreading at a fast pace, faster than in Liberia. And the recovery rate of those infected is also high in Sierra Leone. So we thought our help would be most effective there.
The ministry is also preparing for worst-case scenarios. In the event a team member contracts the Ebola virus, the ministry is considering transporting the victim on a U.S.-run private airliner to a facility in Europe for treatment. They would not be sent to Korea over concerns that the long flight could worsen their condition. Once their mission in Sierra Leone is complete, all team members will be quarantined in Korea for 21 days to make sure they're Ebola-free. The ministry says it's considering sending 3 separate teams to West Africa next year, each composed of 10 people, for similar efforts. Korea dispatched a team to Sierra Leone earlier this month, primarily to conduct site inspections of medical facilities there. Kim Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
The pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong is still on, but police cleared out a key protest site in the Mong Kok district today, and they were met with some resistance, of course. Local media reports say student protest leaders Joshua Wong and Lester Shum were detained in the process. They, along with dozens of others, were taken into custody on charges ranging from contempt to court and obstruction of public officers. Many demonstrators still say they remain defiant in their fight for fully free elections in Hong Kong's 2017 chief executive polls. This follows violent clashes Tuesday night, which ended up in police detaining more than 100 people, the highest total in a single day since the movement started 2 months ago.
Business partners face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Na Hyung-kyung and Daniel Che.
Arirang News.
Arirang News. On Early Edition at 6.
Earlier this year, roughly 80 South Koreans were reunited with their North Korean family members after being separated for more than 60 years. But those wanting to meet with their long-lost loved ones aren't just here on the Korean Peninsula. A new documentary shines a light on them and their suffering as well. Our Im Yoon-hee has this next story.
Decades after their separation, these sisters are still unable to hold back their tears as they sing a tribute to their long-lost brother they were forced to leave behind in North Korea. Their story is similar to an estimated 100,000 other first-generation Korean Americans who were separated from their families as a result of the Korean War. Because the U.S. has no political ties with North Korea, contact has been impossible, leaving families wondering if their lost members are even still alive. Now in their 70s and 80s, most are left wondering if they'll ever get an answer at all. For the past 5 years, a team of Korean Americans have worked together to produce a documentary aimed at bringing awareness to this issue, as well as rallying support for a reunion between these families. Through interviews and meetings, second-generation Korean Americans Jason An and Eugene Chung uncover the heartbreak and burden these family members have endured, now grandmothers and grandfathers, who are still hoping that someday they'll be able to see the faces of their beloved family members once again. The documentary is 50 minutes long, but goes in depth with 3 of the 100,000 who were separated on the Korean Peninsula, shedding light on the pain of a divided family. This film has been screened at various locations around the U.S., including the U.S. Congress, Harvard University, and at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies in Seoul. With each screening, the team hopes to bring House Concurrent Resolution 91 into effect, which will potentially open opportunities for separated family members to be reunited. Im Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
Now moving on to some tech news. Technology does more than making our lives more convenient. It can mean life-altering changes for those living with disabilities. Our Son Jung-in shows us one of the latest examples.
Shin Hyung-jin has suffered from a rare disease since birth that has weakened his muscles and leaves him unable to move. The graduate student in computer science at Yonsei University in Seoul relies mainly on his sight to interact with the world. Now, thanks to a new eye mouse developed by Samsung Electronics, Shin can now interact more easily with his computer. This is a second-generation eye-tracking mouse dubbed the iCan Plus that comes with better calibration sensitivity and an overall improvement in user experience. Users can move the mouse cursor on the screen with their eyes and click by blinking or staring at a specific link for a moment.
We developed this device in hopes that people with disabilities can easily communicate with the world.
Samsung says it plans to donate units of the new eye mouse to charities and will open and share related technologies to promote further development of the sector. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Korea's largest annual design fair got started this Wednesday. Not unlike the previous editions, it's about giving brilliant designers and their works a well-deserved opportunity to shine. But another star takes center stage this year at the festival. It's the theme. As our Park Ji-won reports, it puts a focus on social consciousness and improving people's lives.
Korea's largest annual design fair features a diverse range of innovative and creative items. For example, all of this modern light equipment is made from 3D printers. And how about this cute ribbon-shaped wine stopper? There are also furniture pieces designed specifically for small studio apartments or one-person homes. And then there's this interior LED light.
The shape is inspired by traditional white Korean porcelain pieces, yet its distinctive characteristic is that it's made of a silicone material, which makes for warmer and softer lighting.
The design fair not only showcases fresh ideas by up-and-coming designers, it also puts so-called social designs into the spotlight that aim to change society for the better through smart designs. For instance, these products were designed by children facing physical or psychological challenges. All the profits will be spent on their art education. And these pretty flower patterns apply to products like smartphone covers, mugs, and t-shirts, come from paintings made by victims of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement during art therapy sessions.
I thought their paintings could be used for design pieces. Our goal is to have people view and respect them as artists, not merely as victims.
There are social issues that fit into the theme of this year's festival: well-aged life, well-balanced design.
This year's design festival attempts to see whether designers can provide solutions for creating a healthier society.
The 13th annual design fair is expected to draw tens of thousands of visitors during its 5-day run that ends Sunday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Well, now on to a piece of information not everyone probably is aware of. Did you know that Korean was the 13th most spoken language in the world? I did not know that.
We, as in French for yes, I believe I'd say French because we apparently beat French for that ranking, so that's quite something. And interest in learning language is definitely growing. Our Shin Se-min talks about some of the efforts being made to nurture that interest.
He wasn't driven by K-pop. Ethiopian student Bizayo Bekata came to Korea to study medicine, inspired by Korean doctors who are treating the sick back in his home country. But before he could even begin his desired field of study, Bekata first had to learn the language it was being taught in.
아직까지 어려운 건 쓰기예요. 예, 한국 쓰기. 계속 뭐 예를 들면 어떤 지났으면 못 따라듣는 거 있으면은 다시 플레이하고 그런 식으로 했어요.
More than 86,000 foreigners were receiving paychecks in Korea as of last year. To attract more, the government has rolled out a plan to issue more work visas.
중요하죠. 지금 터키에서 예전에는 한국어에 대한 인식이 높지는 않았는데 요즘 한류 덕분이기도 하고 한국 기업들 때문이기도 한데 이렇게 한국과 졸업생들은 대부분 다 취직이 되고요. 이스탄불이나 큰 도시에 터키 큰 도시에 있는 한국 기업들에 취직이 되고.
The Cyber University of Korea is facilitating efforts by offering free online language courses in 5 languages. The founder of the program says he plans to personalize teaching materials for foreigners working in different fields.
With the lessons that are provided, foreigners will have no trouble handling casual, everyday conversations. But I think providing them with the skills to understand language specific to their field will help bring more foreign workers to Korea.
Language is no longer just a form of communication, but also a medium that opens doors to a country's culture. The learning and teaching of the Korean language could also soon become the driving force behind the growth of the Korean economy. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Well, it was a relatively pleasant day here in Seoul today, weather-wise. Let's find out more with our Michelle Park.
Right. For that, as always, we will go to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Good evening, Michelle.
Good evening, guys. And as you said, we had a pretty nice day here in Korea with warm temperatures for the end of November. And as you can see here, our morning lows and daytime highs are higher compared to the average by 6 degrees. And we are expecting even higher daytime highs tomorrow, ranging between the mid to high teens with mostly clear skies as well. And however, this warm, favorable weather won't last very long. Looking further into the forecast, we have a last bit of fall rain forecast all across the nation this Friday and Sunday, which will push the lows below the freezing point. And going over to our temperature readings for tomorrow. So we'll start off the morning at 6 degrees before reaching up to 15 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will top to 16 and 17 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju-an peaks to 17 also, while Dokdo hits 14, while Nankangang a little bit higher at 15 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks for that, Michelle. That's a wrap for us. Thank you for staying with us. If you're tuning in from different time zones, we bid you a wonderful day. This has been Daniel Choi.
And I'm Na Hyun-kyung. To our viewers in Korea, have a great rest of the evening. Daniel and I will be back tomorrow, same time. Bye-bye for now.